It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? It's a neighborly day in this beauty wood, a neighborly day for a beauty. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? I have always wanted to have a neighbor just like you. I've always wanted to live in a neighborhood with you, so let's make the most of this beautiful day. Since we're together, we might as well say, would you be mine? Could you be mine? Won't you be my neighbor? Won't you please? Won't you please? Please won't you be my neighbor?
And that is a question that we're going to be looking at today, that last question he asked. Is there anybody in your life who is asking you that question right now? Won't you please, won't you please, won't you please be my neighbour? Being a good neighbour was about being authentically you, telling your stories, being who you are. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, Sean and Al are going to come and read our passage for us.
One day, an expert in religious law stood up to test Jesus by asking him this question, "Teacher, what should I do to inherit eternal life?" Jesus replied, "What does the law of Moses say? How do you read it?" The man answered, "You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your strength, and all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." "Right," Jesus told him, "do this and you will live." The man wanted to justify his actions, so he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?"
Jesus replied with a story. A Jewish man was traveling from Jerusalem down to Jericho, and he was attacked by bandits. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him up, and left him half dead beside the road. By chance, a priest came along, but when he saw the man lying there, he crossed to the other side of the road and passed him by. A temple assistant walked over, looked at him lying there, but he also passed on to the other side. Then a despised Samaritan came along, and when he saw the man, he felt compassion for him. Going over to him, the Samaritan soothed his wounds with olive oil and wine and bandaged them. Then he put the man on his own donkey and took him to an inn, where he took care of him. The next day he handed the innkeeper 2 silver coins, telling him, "Take care of this man. If this bill runs higher than this, I'll pay you next time I'm here."
Now, which of these 3 would you say was a neighbor to the man who was attacked by bandits? Jesus asked. The man replied, "The one who showed him mercy." Then Jesus said, "Yes, now go and do the same."
Thank you. Now I want to start an activity now that's going to run the whole way through the rest of the celebration today. So now isn't your only opportunity to do this. So keep on doing it through the whole way through the celebration. So before I do the short talk today, and I really do mean short talk today, I want to ask you 4 questions. 4 questions that I'd like you to think about now and during the talk and afterwards. And all in the context of the story we've just heard. The first question is this, and children and young people, I'd like you to think about this too, because I think you can definitely do this. First question I want to ask is, who is your neighbour? right now, who is your neighbour? That might mean the people you physically live next door to. They are your neighbours, that's absolutely right. Or the people you come into contact with every day. Could be someone you're helping right now through something. Could be a charity you support. Which organisations do you offer practical help to? Where do your finances go? Not that I'm asking you about your financial situation, I'm asking you where your finances go. Anyone you're helping through a difficult situation. So I want you to think about that question. We're going to just have it as who is your neighbour, but those are the kind of things that you could think about. The second and third one, the same colour, because they're sort of the same question, really. Who is asking you to be their neighbour right now? Slightly trickier question, but who is asking you to be their neighbour, to be your neighbour right now? And who is asking you for help or in need? Now, we do have a picture. A child in here will recognise themselves in it. This was Ella's idea she brought to church when she wanted to support the children of the Ukraine through the Teddy Trust. So God put this on her heart and she came to share it with us. So right now, Ella was being a neighbour to the children of the Ukraine. Who was asking to be a neighbour to the children of the Ukraine? So that is one way that God has spoken to some of our young people very recently. She didn't think about, their race, their culture, their location or anything. She wanted to be a neighbour to them. So the second question is, who is asking you to be their neighbour? Is there a situation that God's put on your heart? Is there a person he's put on it? Have you seen people struggling recently? And does your heart ache for something when you see it on the news? Because I know our hearts all ache for different things that God's put on our hearts. That's the first three questions, but in two. And finally, I've got one other question, possibly the trickiest one of the lot. In the story, we heard that the Levite and the priest both crossed over the road. They both crossed over the road. What would make you cross over the road? Now, that might sound like a really, really personal question, but I'm going to give you some examples when I do the talk later of what makes me cross the road. But it could be physically, if someone's there with a big dog, you don't like dogs, you might cross the road. If someone's yelling and being very loud, that might make you cross the road. If there's a very big group of people, that might make you cross the road. Now, sometimes it's understandable why we cross the road. I do understand that. But the Samaritan took a risk in helping the man who'd been attacked. And the greatest risk could have been actually rejection. Because the man could have turned around and said, not you. So I want you to think about those four questions as we listen to a song that's going to be played. And I want you to come up and I want you to write on these little hearts here the answer to any of those questions. It could be who you're helping. It could be who's asking you to be their neighbour. It could be the barriers that stop you from being somebody's neighbour. Whatever it is, I would like you to come, write it on a heart and stick it on the cross. And I want to cover the cross. Because God wants to take our triumphs, the things we do really well, and celebrate with us. But he also wants to hear about the things that actually make us a little bit nervous, that make us anxious, that make us worried, and we can bring them to the cross too. So there's going to be loads of positive things. There's also going to be some of our fears, what makes us cross the road. And that's fine too. Because God is big enough to deal with that. So children, that includes you. If you could have a sit with your mums and dads or whoever's with you today, have a think what you could write on these hearts as we listen to this song. I want this cross covered in stuff. So it's not just one opportunity to come. You could come and write 15 things during the celebration. I'm fine with that. So we're going to listen to this song and have a think about what we want to write and come up anytime you like. We have got some amazing things on there already, but please don't feel that that is the end of that. We want to keep on bringing all those joys, all those things we are happy with that we do really well. We also want to bring the things that we fear. So please, during the talk or during the worship afterwards, I want you to continue to bring that stuff to Jesus. Today we're going to focus on the second part of the commandment that we saw earlier. We're going to look at love your neighbour as yourself. I wonder who you think your neighbour is. And some of you have put some of those things on here already. Now, the man in the story, at best, wasn't sure, or at worst, actually, he was testing Jesus to see what he was going to say. Because in the writings that he already knew, back in Leviticus 19, it says this: "Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against anyone among your people, but love your neighbour as yourself. I am the Lord." But in the Good Samaritan story, he's asking Jesus to define that much more specifically. Because in that text, it does say your people. And to them, your people would mean the fellow Israelites, their fellow Jews. However, later in verse 33 it says, "When a foreigner resides among you in your land, do not mistreat them. The foreigner residing among you must be treated as your native born. Love them as yourself. For you were foreigners in Egypt. I am the Lord your God." So if this bit is true, that meant that all people were their neighbours and not just their fellows. There are lots of things that keep society from helping one another. Some of it's locational. They grew up in a different place to me. Now, I'm originally from Carnarvon. I'm not from Wrexham, and there was a great rivalry between Carnarvon and Bangor. I committed the ultimate sin. I married someone from Bangor, even though I was from Carnarvon, and that was, you didn't do that. So people from different places are sort of sometimes bred not to like one another, which is not right, it's not a good thing, but that is what happens when we live in different locations. They may have a different skin colour to me, they have a different accent, they speak a different language. The way they worship is different to ours. They don't match, their God is different, or at least we see God in a different way. I'm too busy, I don't have enough time. I'm too important. I don't agree with their theology, their morals, their ways. They're too dirty. They might rob me. All these things stand in the way. But Jesus answers the question quite clearly in the story we heard. The Samaritan, who was the unlikeliest to help, probably because of the fewer things I've just listed, but he was the one who did. The one who was the greatest neighbour. He overcame all those things to help someone in need. Now, Jesus often used stories that people already knew to illustrate his point. And some people suggest that this might be true in this case. Chris Rogers talks about many rabbis telling this story, and it being about the importance of helping the poor and actually knowing your place in society. I'm going to explain that a little bit more. The Jews at the time were used to hearing stories about priests, about Levites, about workers of the temple, and about themselves. I might suggest today the priest and Levite were potentially unable to help the half-dead man, as they needed to be ritually clean before serving in the temple. There are verses in the Old Testament that support it. And this was their role in society. Their role was to be workers of the temple. They knew their place. They knew their role. The final person in the rabbi's story actually wasn't a Samaritan like we know it, but instead a Jewish layman. And he was able to help because part of his service to God was to serve the people, and therefore he could help. So when Jesus was retelling this potentially already familiar story, he wanted to take that familiar and make it about something unfamiliar. When they got to the section about the third man who came along, they were all expecting to hear about a Jewish layman. But here's the shock and horror moment. It wasn't that, but it was a Samaritan. The two nations that hated each other the most. Now, we're not just talking, I don't like you very much here. Okay? We're talking about hatred that ran very deep. So in the Jewish teachings, in the Mishnah Sheveth, it says, "He that eats the bread of the Samaritans is like one who eats the flesh of pigs." Now, bearing in mind that pigs are wholly unclean, this was quite the insult. So not only are they not allowed to be together, they're not actually allowed to eat something that the other has made. That's like one removed. That's how much they disliked each other. Jesus wanted this story to be more than just about helping people, because the characters would remain the same. He wanted it to change their perspective, jolt them out of the familiar into something deeper for them to think about. I want us to turn to a verse from Micah chapter 6. It's verse 6 to 8, and it says, "What can we bring to the Lord? Should we bring him burnt offerings? Should we bow before God Most High with offerings of yearling calves? Should we offer him thousands of rams and 10,000 rivers of olive oil? Should we sacrifice our firstborn children to pay for our sins? No. O people, the Lord has told you what is good, and this is what he requires of you: to do what is right, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God." In this verse, it takes what the priest and the Levite did and turns it on its head. He says, do what is right, love mercy, and walk humbly with God. So Luke 10:27, which is the verse we've been looking at, right at the beginning of this celebration, echoes of this verse. It talks about loving God, always doing the right thing, and answers the question which Jesus asked at the end of the Good Samaritan story: which one was a neighbour? The one who showed mercy. Now, I looked mercy up in the Bible, in the dictionary, which I believe all people are supposed to do when they come and do talks for people. And it says this: compassion or forgiveness shown towards someone whom it is within one's power to punish or harm. And in that moment for the Samaritan, he could have chosen a different route. He could have chosen, due to the hatred between the nations, to cause more damage, to stick the boot in, as it were. He could have done that because that was the hatred that ran between these two nations. So he could have taken that opportunity to cause more suffering, but he didn't take it. He could have walked away, just like the Levite and the priest, and not helped, but not made it worse either. He saw that neutral point in the story. He could have done nothing. But Jesus was illustrating to go the extra mile, to take that step one step further, to not only show compassion and mercy, but to show it to the people that you might cross the road away from. We are called in both of these passages to love God and love people. Let me clarify this. It doesn't mean we always have to agree with them, but we are called to love them, and love them unconditionally, just like Jesus has loved us. I can assure you that I have had points in my life where I have sinned, I've done stuff wrong, I've not walked in the way that God wanted me to. But he has never, ever stopped loving me. And this was strong for me in the bad times and in the good times. And I am called to love my neighbour as God has loved me. Now, at the weekend, I went to see Wrexham play. Now, I know we lost, and I know there's a lot of things around the Wrexham game at the moment, and it wasn't the result we wanted. We're not going to dwell on that, I promise. You may or may not know that I actually feel incredibly uncomfortable in very, very big crowds, and especially in crowds that are making lots of excessive noise. I feel very uncomfortable in those situations, and both of which were present at that moment. Situations like that could be a moment where I choose to cross the road, to clutch my children a little bit tighter, try and block out the noise as best I can. But I believe that in these moments, God is challenging me to think about what I would do if any of these people needed my help right where I was and despite how I'm feeling. I'm not at all suggesting that these people are my sworn enemies like the Samaritans are, nothing like that. But they are situations that make me doubt my ability to show God's love in practical ways. But I have to hold on to one verse in particular. In Isaiah 40, verse 31, it says, "But those who trust in the Lord will find new strength." When I'm weak, when I'm scared, when I'm doubting, when I'm timid, when I'm nervous, when I'm uneasy, when I'm cautious, I will choose to say, I trust in the Lord, and I will find new strength. I'll end on this note. The world is full of people today who are in desperate need of a neighbour, who are crying out in various ways, "Won't you be my neighbour?" they ask. And just as the Good Samaritan in the story helped the one in need, Jesus says to you and me, go and do the same. I'm going to literally finish on a quote that was said by Martin Luther King that I found as I was doing this. It says, "I imagine that the first question the priest and Levi asked was, 'If I stop to help this man, what will happen to me?' But by the very nature of his concern, the Good Samaritan reversed the question. 'If I do not stop to help this man, what will happen to him?'"